and I call the member for Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I've been involved in this process with starting off in a pilot of the cashless debit card, and have seen the statements and comments from the communities there and the considerations that were taken into place, and knowing that whilst that was into remote communities, there are actually people in my community who would benefit from such a program. Somehow and in some way, we need to help turn the tide on the dependency cycle of drug and alcohol addiction and the subsequent social and cultural damage that becomes the result. Some people will think I'm referring only to the cashless debit card that's been trialled in these two very self-motivated communities who wished and were consulted in the whole process in remote Australia, but I'm not. This initiative was set in motion by a request from that community, from their elders, from all the stakeholders in that community. It was their desperate project to rescue their children, their neighbourhood and their self-respect. Alcohol and drugs are the cause of so much destruction, whether it's the physical damage to the jaw of the woman, the virginity of the child, the broken leg of the young boy, or a hole in the wall, the wreck of a car accident, or the effect on the unborn child, who will develop learning difficulties at best, or the incapacity to learn due to brain damage and disability because of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. How can anyone think that this is not a good policy? The previous speaker spoke of questions in relation to the survey from the interpersonal responses. Any survey can be interpreted in any way, depending on the perspective of the researcher. The opposition are fundamentally opposed to this scheme, so of course they will find little pieces of statistics in there that match their counter-argument. Talking about the $7,000 to $9,000 cost per person, whereas we actually see this as an investment in these people, trying to prevent the car accidents that come about because of drunken drivers, trying to prevent the hospitalisations of domestic violence, women and children. All of those are actually savings to the community, let alone their own ability to deal with what's going on in their life, or lose their children because of their bad behaviour and their inability to manage how they spend the money they receive. These issues are so significant to me, and they're not just related to remote communities. All the above issues that I spoke of before, the domestic violence, the child sexual abuse, car accidents, hospitalisation and FASD, they're not limited to remote Australia. They exist in everyone's backyard to a greater or lesser extent. This is everyone's problem, and we must seriously work together to repair the damage that in some communities is entrenched. The cashless debit card cannot and should not be summarily dismissed. It is an action that is effectively turning back. It's turning its back on the communities who are plagued by drug and alcohol addiction and gambling abuse. The cashless debit card has been operating in operation in Ceduna in South Australia and the Kimberley in Western Australia since April 2016, and it's planned for introduction to the Western Australian goldfields and in Bundaberg Hervey Bay from early this year. It was introduced with the support of the local leaders to combat the excessive welfare-fuelled alcohol abuse in particular. I hesitate to think that we stop bringing in a good program because some people will try and get around a good program. Bad people will always invent a way to continue to be bad. But does that mean that we stop the social benefit because of somebody's bad social ingenuity? We can't stop them all the time, but we can do our best, because every human life is valuable. We do our best to try and prevent drug addiction. We do our best to try and prevent alcohol addiction. We do our best to try and prevent gambling abuse. You can't actually teach that person unless they admit to themselves they have a problem. Then they start to do that cycle themselves, but they don't have as much ready cash. It's part of the game of changing their behaviour, and it's so important. But honestly, the main game here is to look after the vulnerable. The main game here is to look after the domestic violence women. The main game is to look after the children, their education, their food. How can they learn if they're hungry because their parents have spent the money on something else? This is the main game of this program, and that's something we should never lose sight of. And one of the speakers spoke about you can't automatically transfer for renting your premises. Well, last time I spoke to Centrelink and people were on renting a house, they had rent assistance and it went straight to the landlord or the Department of Housing or whatever, but Centrelink took care of that for them. So I seriously don't think that that should be a problem. In East Kimberley, one of the elders said that they supported the card because the alcohol abuse is destroying our community and our culture and devastating the lives of the children. How can a drunk adult teach their children about culture in an Indigenous community? I doubt they can even get the dots on the dot painting in a straight line, let alone actually teach them about the history and the philosophy and the beautiful culture that goes along with that, about their guardianship of the land. It's just not going to happen. It's estimated that in many remote communities, 1/4 of all babies are born brain damaged from alcohol abuse. This is scary. This is absolutely scary. FASD isn't even a diagnostic tool with all doctors. Some doctors don't even know about it. So how can they diagnose it and get more teachers and more resources into a school for children who've been alcohol affected during that first trimester of pregnancy? The card, which restricts money spent on alcohol, drugs and gambling, was subject to an independent evaluation done by the Arima Research, which, as I said, can be interpreted in different ways and according to different people, because statistics always can. But there was a considerable positive impact in the communities where it's operating. 41% were drinking less, 48% were gambling less and taking fewer drugs. 40% said they were better able to care for their children. But even more importantly, the number of car accidents was reduced, the number of hospital entrants was reduced, the number of domestic violence incidents was reduced, and there were more children attending school. Those are undeniable facts and undeniable statistics. In the goldfields, each of the elected councils in the region supported its introduction. There were over 270 consultations undertaken. In Hervey Bay, there were over 110 consultations, including public forums and a community-wide survey of which 75% responded in favour. In Gilmore, there are many community advocates also requesting the introduction of this card. I agree, there should be proper community consultation, but not costing us an arm and a leg, quite literally, of children who are being damaged during a domestic violence fight. Let's make sure we get our stakeholders on board and make sure we bring this in properly. It's my belief that most of these potential participants will be only too keen for the card to break the cycle. We know it will help make a difference to young kids' lives. Some kids are neglected and parents are out of control, which is why we have so many custodial grandparents. We can't stop that unless we do something to intervene. Some of the Indigenous people said that they're burying people. They've still got funerals ahead of them to lay people to rest because of abuse of alcohol. Somehow, somewhere, we have to change the cycle. These communities are crying out for help to stop the drug and alcohol abuse, to stop the violence, and to build better lives for their children. The cashless debit card is not a silver bullet, but it has led to fundamental improvement in these pilot communities. There are very few other initiatives that have had such an impact. If we could develop a better way to use money, where the welfare support is spent on food for the family, school uniforms, toys, and all the other trappings of a better home environment, surely that is a worthwhile target. Surely we can aim to reduce the number of young people coming into hospital. Surely we can stop the number of children being beaten up. Surely we can prevent the number of women presenting with a broken jaw, teeth knocked out, black eyes, broken arms. Surely we can stop it. Surely we can stop the number of children being removed from their homes because the parents are incapable of looking after their children because they're addicted to ice. I have one family back home where the grandmother is desperately trying to get access to her grandchildren. because the mother is addicted to ice, the father is the dealer of ice. Every time the people come in, they say to the family, we're going to come in and inspect your family. So the lady keeps the house clean, cleans up, because she's not actually on ice at that moment, she's in a regular time, cleans it all up, so fax comes in and says, oh yeah, they're fine. The grandmother knows that these children are at risk. She's desperate to bring in this because she knows that it's going to help break the cycle. Surely we can get less gambling debt, less alcoholism, an endless cycle of drug taking. This card is most definitely a step in the right direction to help all of those in our community who have not had the chance to learn about balancing budgets, or food that comes before dope, beer, ice or the pokies. Financial literacy is not about giving people a booklet on how to put your money in the bank and take it out only when you need it and you need to spend it on things that are important to your family. It's a long-term learning thing for some families. If they haven't learned it in their own family, and I've got third-generation families who've never put a cent in the bank themselves, don't know how to. The only money they've ever had is income support. Let's not squander this opportunity on changing the cycle of what's happening in some of our lower socioeconomic areas and some of our areas where people really don't know that this isn't the way to behave for their children. Let's put our kids first. Let's put our women first. Let's put our communities first. And in the end, it's putting our nation first. Thank you.